Over the course of this module, we examined several strategies involving the details within a text and how we can use those to help us understand and interpret a variety of literary and informational texts that we may encounter on the TABE test. Let's take a few minutes to go and review some of the strategies that we have learned. In our first strategy, we examined how we can use details within the text to help us understand and explain meaning. We learned that the details provide clues to us about the topic of the text. So we need to ask those who, what, when, where, why, and how questions to help us pull out those details that we need to further explain what the author means. Our job as good reading detectives is to take the details within the text and piece them together to find the author's main idea, make inferences, and draw conclusions from the text. So we learned about main idea, and all that is the author's main point. What point is he or she trying to drive home? Inferences are those educated guesses that we make based on the details within the text. So we use information stated by the author to determine an unstated message. To make an inference, we're going to look for supporting details and do a little bit of reading detective work to determine how those details are related. And then finally, we talked about drawing conclusions based on information within the text. A conclusion is a logical statement made by combining a general statement and a specific example. So when we think of the statement that stars are extremely hot, and then we think of the statement, the sun is a star. What conclusion can we draw from that? If stars are extremely hot and the sun is a star, therefore we can conclude that the sun is extremely hot. Our conclusion is true because the general statement and the specific example are both true. However, if either the general statement or the specific example are not true, then our conclusion is automatically false. Let's take a moment and apply what we have learned about identifying details and using them to explain meaning in some examples from IXL. In this passage, we see how baseball players began wearing caps. So we need to select the best detail to show the baseball players wanted to look like Civil War soldiers. So let's take a moment and review some of the details provided to us in the text. All right, so in the 1850s, when baseball was getting its start in this country, most players wore straw hats. This all changed after the Civil War. It says in the late 1860s, players began wearing visor caps. The caps were imitations of those worn by Union and Confederate soldiers on the field of battle. So which statement shows that baseball players wanted to look like Civil War soldiers? Well, if we look at our last statement, the caps were imitations of those worn by Union and Confederate soldiers on the fields of battle. If we look closely at this statement, it gives us a detail about the caps that helps us to see why the baseball players began to wear these. So in this case, our last statement is true. We're going to look at a brief passage and see if we can use the details provided to make an inference. Ben shoved a fistful of mashed peas into his mouth and then threw his cup on the floor. When Josh bent over to pick up the cup, Ben squealed and grabbed his brother's hair. "You little monster," Josh laughed. So based on this text, which of the two sentences is most likely true? Our first sentence says Ben is a baby. The second sentence says Ben is a cruel bully. So what information do we have in the text to help us determine which statement is true? Well, when we look at the text, it says Ben shoved a fistful of mashed peas in his mouth and then threw his cup on the floor. Okay, so let's think about that, or those two actions. All right, shoved a fistful of mashed peas into his mouth, threw his cup on the floor. We also see that Ben squealed and grabbed his brother's hair. Now, do these actions sound like something that a bully would do? Maybe. Do they sound like something that a baby would do? Yes. I have a toddler and he still does this. So, yes, these are definitely actions that a baby would do. Our biggest clue is Josh's reaction. "You little monster," Josh laughed. Does that sound like the type of reaction that Josh would have to a cruel bully? No. But it does sound like the reaction that Josh would have towards his baby brother. In this case, no, Ben is not a cruel bully. We can make the inference that Ben is a baby. In our second strategy, we learned how to use details within the text and quote them to help support our analysis of it. So we learned that first, we can use quotes from the text to help support our inferences. Some examples where we will see this would be identifying the main idea in an informational text or the theme in a fictional text. We also will use quotes from the text to support explicit information. Explicit means that it is directly stated in the text. Some clear examples where we will see this in a literary text would be details about the event that's taking place or the setting where the story is occurring. We also see details about the author's characters, and we can use those specific quotes to support what we identify about those characters. Oftentimes, we have to ask the question, well, how do I know this? We read a passage, how do I know that this is true? In this case, we use quotes to help us answer that question. So, for example, when we are stating an inference, we are going to quote specific details within the passage to support that inference. Let's use this brief passage to help us see how we use details quoted directly from the text to support an analysis such as an inference. She did not carry a lunch tray. She did carry a large canvas bag with a life-size sunflower painted on it. The lunchroom was dead silent as she walked by. She stopped at an empty table, laid down her bag, slung the instrument strap over her chair, and sat down. In this passage, we can infer, based on information given, that the students don't quite know what to make of this girl. And there is one specific statement that we can use to support that inference. So let's take a look at the passage and see if we can find that sentence. So we see that she's not carrying a lunch tray, she's carrying a large canvas bag with a life-size sunflower painted on it. The lunchroom was dead silent as she walked by. And then the last statement just describes actions that she took. Well, if our inference is that the students don't know what to make of the new girl, our proof, our support, is that the lunchroom was dead silent as she walked by. Well, why would they be dead silent? Well, it's because they don't know what to make of the new girl. So, our quoted statement from the text to support our inference that they don't know what to make of her is, the lunchroom was dead silent as she walked by. Let's examine another passage to practice quoting details from the text to support an analysis. "You're right," Claudia answered. "A taxi is expensive. The bus is cheaper. It's only 20 cents each. We'll take the bus." Only 20 cents each. That's 40 cents total. No bus. We'll walk. "We'll wear out 40 cents worth of shoe leather," Claudia mumbled. "You're sure we have to walk?" "Positive," Jamie answered. "Which way do we go?" Based on the information in this text, we can make the inference that Jamie is worried about spending money. In this case, which statement from the text can we use to support our inference? All right, so we see Claudia is saying that, a taxi is expensive, a bus is cheaper. Let's take the bus. Well, Jamie responds, "Only 20 cents each, that's 40 cents total. No bus, we'll walk." All right, so 40 cents doesn't really sound like a whole lot. But this statement here, only 20 cents each, that's 40 cents total. So she is pointing out how much it's going to cost them to take the bus. Her response, "No bus, we'll walk." Now, if 40 cents to us doesn't really sound like much, due to the fact that her reaction is that they are not going to take the bus, they're going to walk, we can use this statement to show that Jamie is worried about spending that money. Only 20 cents each, that's 40 cents total, no bus, we'll walk, is what we would use to support our analysis.